Welcome back to Inside the Philippines. I'm glad you're here. Today's story is a quieter one than most we tell on this channel. There's no scammer in it, no bar girl, no catfish, no woman with 3 other foreign boyfriends sending money she'll never repay. None of that. And in some ways, that makes this one harder to sit with than the others. His name is Brendan. 55 years old, from Cork, Ireland. 32 years a merchant marine. The deep-sea kind, container ships and bulk carriers across the Atlantic and Mediterranean. Finishing his career as a second engineer before a divorce took most of what he had to show for it. He came to the Philippines the way thousands of men his age come these days. He watched a few YouTube videos. He did the maths on a beer mat in a hotel bar. The maths told him he couldn't afford Ireland anymore. The videos told him he could afford Cebu. So he booked a one-way ticket and went. What he found there wasn't what the videos had shown him. It wasn't a scam. It wasn't a betrayal. It was something stranger and, in its way, more painful. The slow, gentle discovery that the dream of living on $1,200 a month assumes you live alone, love no one, and need nothing. Brendan didn't manage any of those 3. I'm not going to tell you how this ends. I'll just say this: by the time you've sat with him for an hour, you'll understand something about the Philippines that the retirement videos won't tell you. You'll understand why a man can leave a place without anyone having done anything wrong. You'll understand the difference in this country between being loved and being needed. This one's going to stick with you. Here's his story, in his own words. My name is Brendan. I was born in Mayfield, on the north side of Cork City, in 1970. Council estate, 4 kids in 2 bedrooms. My father drove a delivery lorry and my mother worked nights at the hospital cleaning. We weren't poor exactly. We just weren't anything else either. I went to sea at 19. That's what lads from Mayfield did if they wanted out. You signed on with one of the Cork agencies. You spent 6 months in the engine room of a Greek-flagged rust bucket, and if you didn't get killed or get the sack, you came back with more money than your da made in a year. I never got killed, so I kept going. 32 years. Maersk, Hapag-Lloyd, a stretch with a Japanese line, a few years with the Norwegians. Mostly the Atlantic and the Med. I worked my way up. Wiper, oiler, 3rd engineer, 2nd. I never made chief. Honest answer is, I wasn't ambitious enough for it. I just wanted the contracts and the dollars and the 4 months ashore at the end of each one. I met Awaifa in 1996. She was a nurse at the Mercy. We got married the year after, both of us 26. Bought a house in Ballincollig. Small, semi-detached, the kind of place a young couple buys when they think there's going to be children. There weren't, in the end. We tried for years. It didn't happen. We never quite talked about it after a while, you know? You just stopped bringing it up. So that was the pattern. 9 months at sea, 4 months home, 3 decades of it. I'd come back, we'd be a bit awkward for a week, then we'd settle into it. Then I'd be gone again. I thought we were grand. I thought that was just what marriage looked like for people like us. I sent home every penny that wasn't San Miguel in cigarettes. I paid off the mortgage by the time I was 46. I was proud of that mortgage. I'll skip ahead. October 2024. I came home off a 9-month run on a Maersk container ship. Algeciras to New York and back. 12 crossings. I got off the plane at Cork Airport, took a taxi to Ballincollig, and the key didn't fit the front door. I stood there for about a minute thinking I'd gone to the wrong house. I hadn't. There was a letter on the kitchen table. The estate agent had let her give it to him to leave for me. From a solicitor's office on the South Mall. She'd been seeing the solicitor for 2 years, while I was in the bloody Atlantic. I won't go into the settlement. You don't want to hear about it, and I don't want to tell it. The short version is that, under Irish family law, a stay-at-home wife of 28 years is entitled to a fair bit, and a fair bit was what she got. The house, half the pension, the credit union account I'd been feeding since I was 23. I signed the papers in November in a hotel room off Patrick Street. My solicitor was a young one called Niev, who couldn't quite look me in the eye. I walked out of that hotel with a duffel bag, the clothes I was standing in, and 14,000 euros in a credit union account she hadn't found. That was it. 32 years. I sat in the bar across the street afterwards. The Long Valley, if you know Cork. I had 2 pints of Murphy's, and I took a beer mat and a borrowed pen, and I did the sums. 1,100 euros a month from the half pension. 14,000 euros in the account. Rent in Cork now, a 1-bedroom flat, was 1,400 a month. The beer mat told me I had about 3 months before I was eating into the savings, and about 14 months before there were no savings. 32 years feeding a marriage, and I never once heard the sound of it dying. That's the thing I keep coming back to. I didn't see it. I was watching the engine, listening for the wrong noises in there, and meanwhile, the whole hull was rotting out underneath me. I didn't go back to Ballincollig that night. Couldn't. I drove up to Limerick. I don't even know why Limerick. And I got a room at a Travelodge by the motorway, and I lay there on top of the bed in my coat, and I couldn't sleep. About 3 in the morning, I opened the laptop. That's where it started, really. 3 in the morning, in a Travelodge in Limerick, with my phone on charge and my hands still shaking a bit. I wasn't looking for the Philippines. I was just looking for somewhere, anywhere, where 1,100 euros a month wasn't a slow surrender. That's the only way I can describe what Ireland was offering me. A slow surrender. A bedsit and a microwave, and the same 4 walls until the heart gave out. I needed somewhere else. I just didn't know yet that I was going to find it. The way YouTube works, you watch one video, and the algorithm decides who you are now. I watched a thing called Top 10 Cheapest Countries to Retire In. Don't even know why. Probably because it was the first thing on the page. And from then on, the laptop just kept feeding me the same lads. You know the videos, I mean. American fella in his 60s, sunburn coming along nicely, bottle of San Miguel in his hand, sitting on a balcony in Cebu, telling the camera he's living the dream on $1,200 a month. Next video, an Australian in Dumaguete with a Filipina half his age, showing you around his condo. Next one, a Brit in Davao, explaining how the chicken at Jollibee is actually quite good once you get used to the gravy. I watched dozens of them. Hundreds, maybe. I was awake until 6 in the morning that first night, and I don't think I shut the laptop again for a week. Here's the thing those videos do. They show you a number, $1,200, or 1,000, or 1,500. And then they break it down for you on screen. Rent, 300. Food, 200. Beer, 50. Utilities, 80. Big total at the bottom. They smile at the camera. They go, "Mate, why would you ever live in Manchester or Manchester-on-Sea or whatever miserable place you're watching this from when you could live here?" And the maths suddenly worked. That's the thing. I'd done the beer mat in the Long Valley, and Cork was telling me I was poor. Then a man on YouTube was telling me $1,200 was a fortune in Cebu. Same money, different country. I'd gone from a man with no future to a man with a future overnight, just by changing the geography. It felt like getting away with something. I'd been to the Philippines before. That's what nobody at home knew about me. Twice in the 90s on shore leave. Manila in 94. Subic Bay in 97. I was 24 years old in Manila, off a Greek-flagged bulk carrier, and we had 3 days while they did something to the engines. I remember it as warm. I remember English everywhere. I remember a girl in a bar in Ermita who called me Joe and asked if I wanted to dance, and I was too shy to say yes, and a fella from the deck crew laughing at me about it for the rest of the run. I remember San Miguel was 60 pesos a bottle, and the streets smelled of diesel and frying garlic, and the rain came down so hard it bounced. I'd liked it, the way you like anywhere when you're 24 and not on a ship. Subic in 97 was different, quieter. The Americans had left a few years before, the bars were emptying out, but the warmth was the same. The Catholic thing was the same. You'd see a Santo Niño on a dashboard or a rosary hanging off a rear-view mirror. And it was your Nan's house in Mayfield. Nowhere else in Asia ever felt like that to me. Thailand was beautiful, but it was Buddhist, and it was somewhere foreign. The Philippines, you walked into a church and you knew where to sit. I told my sister Mariad it was a holiday. That was the lie. I sat at her kitchen table in Glanmire over a cup of tea, and I said, "I'm going to take a few weeks. I'm going to go somewhere warm. I'll be back before Easter." She looked at me a long time over the rim of her cup. She didn't believe me. She let it go anyway. That's a sister for you. I booked the one-way out of Dublin for the 8th of February, 2025. Qatar Airways, Dublin to Doha. Doha to Mactan, Cebu. 23 hours door to door, if you counted the layover. I packed 2 duffel bags. One was clothes. The other was, I don't know. A photo of my mother. My passport. 3 pairs of work boots I didn't need. The Nokia. The 14,000 euros was in a Bank of Ireland account I'd opened the week before, accessible from anywhere. I wore the same coat I'd worn out of the Long Valley. It was a stupid coat for the Philippines, and I knew it, but I wasn't going to throw it away yet. It still smelled of cork. "I won't lie to you," I cried on the plane. "Not the whole way. Just somewhere over Iran or Iraq, or wherever you are, 6 hours into a Doha leg. I had 2 whiskeys, and the cabin was dark, and the lad next to me was asleep, and I just leaked for a bit, and then I stopped. I'm not a crier, generally. Engine rooms don't make you a crier, but I sat there over the desert at 38,000 feet, and I thought about Aoife and the solicitor and the front door of my own house, and I let it happen, and then I wiped my face with the napkin off the whiskey, and I went to sleep. Mactan, Cebu in February. You walk out of the terminal and the heat hits you like opening an oven door. I'd forgotten how thick it was. Wet heat. The kind that makes the inside of your shirt go cold against your back. Diesel from the taxi rank. Frangipani from somewhere I couldn't see. A smell of grilled meat from a stand across the road. Tricycles buzzing past. The lads holding signs for the resorts. A woman selling those little plastic bags of nuts. I'd booked a studio off Booking.com in Lapu-Lapu, just over the bridge. 8,000 pesos a month, about 130 euros. Some Korean had built it as an Airbnb and was trying to fill it long-term. The Grab driver took me there for about 350 pesos and didn't try to overcharge me. The room was on the 3rd floor of a concrete block, with a basketball court out the back and a sari-sari store on the corner where a tiny old woman sold me a red horse and a packet of Marlboros and didn't speak any English at all, but counted out my change to the centavo. I sat on the little balcony of that studio that first evening with the red horse, and I watched the sun go down over the rooftops. There was karaoke starting up somewhere 2 streets over. Air Supply, slaughtered. There was a rooster, even though I was in a city. There were tricycle horns and the slap of flip-flops on concrete, and somebody shouting in Cebuano about something I couldn't follow. The weight came off me. I'm telling you the truth. I'd been carrying it for 4 months and I felt it lift. Nobody knew me. Nobody was waiting on me. Nobody had run off with my house. I was just a quiet old Kano on a balcony with a beer. That was the freedom of it. That was what the videos got right. The first 2 weeks I didn't do much. I walked. I ate in malls. The Marina Mall food court mostly, because it was air-conditioned and I knew where everything was. I had Jollibee twice in the first week, just to say I had. The chicken's grand. The gravy is a war crime. I took grab cars to nowhere in particular. I sat in a Starbucks in Mactan, Newtown for an entire afternoon and didn't do a thing. I met one fella from Newcastle in a bar in Mactan, about my age, been there 4 years. He gave me the standard speech. Don't fall for the first one who smiles at you. Don't go to the bars on Mango Avenue. Don't ever, ever build a house. I nodded at all of it. I bought him a San Miguel. I told myself I'd remember. The videos don't tell you about the loneliness. That's the thing. They show you the rent. They don't tell you what it's like to sit on a balcony at 55 with a red horse and watch other people's families come home for the evening. But I wasn't lonely yet, exactly. I was just quiet, resting, letting the engine cool down for the first time in 32 years. I had no plans. None. I thought maybe in a month I'd go to Bohol, see the Chocolate Hills, see what the islands were like. I thought maybe I'd buy a little motorbike and just ride. I thought a lot of things, sitting on that balcony. I didn't think I was going to walk 2 streets back from the studio one Tuesday lunchtime, looking for somewhere cheaper to eat than the mall, and find a small carinderia with green plastic chairs and a chalkboard menu in Cebuano. But that's where I went, and that's where I met her. It was the first week of March. I'd been there about 3 weeks at that point. The mall food was getting boring, and the malls themselves were starting to feel like every other mall I'd ever been in. Same SM, same Watsons, same Mercury Drug, same lads in Jollibee uniforms shouting orders at each other. I wanted somewhere quieter, somewhere local. The Carinderia was on a side street off the road that runs back from the bridge. No sign, really. Just a corrugated tin awning, 4 green plastic tables, a chalkboard up by the counter with the day's dishes written in Cebuano in colored chalk. There was a glass case with the food in stainless steel trays, adobo, kare-kare, pancit, some kind of fish stew, a tray of rice, 2 ceiling fans going at full pelt, a statue of the Santo Niño on a little shelf above the till with a fairy light blinking around it. The smell of garlic and soy and frying onions. It was about 90 pesos for a full plate. I sat down before I'd even decided to. There were 2 women working it. The older one, 60s maybe, with gray hair pulled back, wearing an apron over a faded blouse. That was the mother, I'd find out, Lola Inde. The younger one was at the till, doing the books in a notebook with a biro. That was Maravich. I'll tell you the truth. I didn't notice her the first time. Not in any way I could put a name to. She brought me a plate of pork adobo and rice, and a glass of iced tea, and she said how much it was in soft, careful English. And I paid, and I ate, and I left. The food was lovely. I came back the next day. Second day, she remembered me. Not in a flirty way. In the way a waitress in a small place in Mayfield would remember you. A small nod, a look that says, I know you've been here before. She brought me the menu without me asking. I had the kare-kare. I noticed her then, properly, just for a second. 38, I'd guess, later. Small build, hair tied back, a face that wasn't trying to be anything. She had a wedding band on her right hand, which I'd later learn was a habit, not a marriage. There was something tired about her. Tired in the good way. The way of a woman who's been working since 6 in the morning and is still being kind about it. Third day, I came in for lunch, and again for dinner. She brought me a plate of pancit at lunch and a plate of sinigang at dinner. Same girl, same day, 2 meals. I caught her looking at me as she set down the dinner plate, and I looked away. She said quietly, "Sir, why does a man eat alone every night?" That was the line. That was it. Soft, careful English. No lead-in, no preamble, just the question. I didn't have an answer. I sat there with the spoon halfway to the rice, and I don't know. I think I went red. I'm a man in his 50s, and I went red like a teenager. I said something about the food being good. She smiled, just a small smile, and went back to the till. I think she saved my life by asking it. I'm not being dramatic. I sat there with that bowl of sinigang, and I realized that nobody had asked me anything personal in 4 months. Not Maryad, not the solicitor, not the lads at the Travelodge breakfast bar, not the Korean landlord, not the fella from Newcastle in the bar. Nobody. I'd been a man in transit. She'd just made me a man in a place. I went back the next day. And the day after. Round about then was when I made the mistake of letting the Newcastle fella drag me up to Mango Avenue. He kept telling me I needed to get out, see the nightlife, get back on the horse. I didn't want to. I went anyway because I was bored and lonely, and a red horse on a balcony was starting to feel like a waste of an evening. You know what Mango is. You've seen it on YouTube. The strip, the LED signs, the lads on motorbikes slowing down to look, the girls outside the bars in those tight little dresses calling you in. We went into one of them, I won't name it, and I had a San Miguel, and within about 90 seconds there were 2 girls at the table calling me daddy and asking where I was from. They were beautiful, and they were polite, and they were absolutely working. I clocked it within the first sentence. The Newcastle fella was loving it. I drank my San Miguel in about 4 pulls, made an excuse about an early flight that didn't exist, and got a grab back over the bridge. I thought about Maravich the whole way home. Not in a romantic way, exactly. Just the contrast. The girls in the bar had clocked the Kano in me before I'd sat down. Maravich had clocked the lonely man. By the end of March, I was eating there twice a day. Lunch at 12, dinner at 6. Same green plastic chair, same view of the chalkboard. She was speaking more English to me. Not fluent, but more than she'd let on the first week. She'd been working in Singapore as a domestic helper for 4 years in her late 20s. That's where the English came from. She'd come back when her father got sick. She had a daughter, Ria, 12 years old, who came in after school in her white uniform and sat in the corner doing homework and giggling with her cousin. The father of Ria had gone to Saudi Arabia for work in 2015 and never come back. And Maravich didn't say much more about it than that. She wasn't divorced. She couldn't be. There's no divorce in this country, as you probably know. She was just abandoned, technically, but in legal terms still a married woman. I didn't think about that yet. I should have. I'll come back to it. In April, I started bringing pasalubong. Small things. A toy for Ria. A little plastic horse from the Robinsons in Macton, 150 pesos, about €2.40. A bag of pan de sal in the morning from the bakery on the corner. A box of Skyflakes for Lola Inde because I'd seen her dipping them in coffee. Stuff like that. Tiny stuff. The mother started calling me Bren. Maravich stopped letting me pay for meals. The first time I tried to pay, she pushed the 100-peso note back across the counter and said, "No, Bren, you are eating with us now." Just like that. Like it had been decided. and I was the last to know. I'm a quiet man. I'm not a romantic. I've spent half my life in steel boxes. But I'll tell you, sitting in that little place at 6 in the evening with a plate of adobo and a glass of iced tea, with the fans going and the karaoke starting up 2 streets over, and Lola Inde saying grace before eating, and Maravich at the till doing her sums in the notebook, I felt something I hadn't felt in, I don't know how long. I felt noticed. That's the only word I have for it. Noticed by somebody who wasn't taking the piss out of me, wasn't waiting for me to leave, wasn't doing the maths on what I might be worth. Or so I thought. And to be fair to her, to be properly fair to her, because I owe her that, I still think she meant it. She did notice me. That part was real. The other part, the maths part, that came later, and it didn't come from her. It came from a whole family I hadn't met yet. The first time I met her father was the second weekend in May. By then, I'd been eating at the Carinderia twice a day for 6 weeks. And Maravich and I were, well, we hadn't said we were anything. There'd been no conversation about it. But on a Thursday night, towards the end of April, she'd walked me back to my studio after closing, the two of us in the dark heat. The karaoke from a neighbor absolutely murdering my way. And at the door of the building, she'd taken my hand for about 4 seconds, and then let it go and gone home. That was it. That was the whole thing. 4 seconds of a small hand in mine on a street in Lapu-Lapu. I went up the 3 flights of stairs to my flat, thinking I was 19 years old. So we were a thing, in the way things become things in a small place, where everybody already knows. By early May, Lola Inde had asked me twice when I was going to come for Sunday lunch, and I'd been making excuses because I knew what coming for Sunday lunch meant. It meant meeting the father. It meant being looked at properly. The second Saturday in May, Maravich just told me. Tomorrow. After Mass. I said yes. Their house was in Cordova, about a 15-minute habal-habal ride from the Carinderia, deeper into the barangay where the road stops being asphalt and becomes packed dirt with chickens on it. Concrete bahay na bato with a tin roof, an open front room with a plastic table and a TV showing GMA7, a small altar in the corner with a Santo Niño, and a framed photo of John Paul II, and a votive candle that was always lit. There were children on the floor, a toddler I didn't know whose, a neighbor's wee one. Ria was at the table doing homework. The smell was lechon. They'd done a small one, 10 kilos for me. I didn't know what to say about that. 10 kilos of lechon, a man's a month's worth of meat, for a fella from Cork who'd never asked for it. Tate boy was sitting in a plastic chair in the corner. 68, thin as a rake, the diabetes already wasted into him. He'd driven a tricycle for 35 years in Lapu-Lapu, and his hands had that look. Calluses gone pale, fingers slightly bent. He stood up when I came in. He didn't speak much English, but he looked me dead in the eye, and he put both his hands on my shoulders, and he said something in Cebuano to Maravich, who translated going pink at it. He says, "You are welcome here." He says, "God has brought you to our daughter, and so you are anak now, son." He hadn't known me 40 seconds. I don't know how to explain to you what that did to me. I'm not a sentimental man. My own father died in 2009 of a heart attack on the way back from Mass at the Glen, dropped in the doorway of the kitchen with the Sunday Independent still under his arm. I hadn't been called son since that morning. 16 years. And here was a man I didn't know, in a house I didn't know, in a country I'd been in for 3 months, putting his hands on my shoulders and calling me anak. I didn't cry. I came close. I shook his hand for too long, and I sat down at the plastic table, and Lola Inde gave me the first plate of lechon, and Maravich poured me a beer in a glass with ice in it, the way they do here. And Tate Boy said grace, and we ate. The TV was on in the background. The toddler was crawling under the chairs. There were neighbors in and out. Somebody's auntie, somebody's cousin, a kid asking for 10 pesos for something. I just sat there in the middle of it, and I let it happen. Catholic country. I was raised on this. The grace before meals, the rosaries on the wall, the candle in front of the saint. Oif and I had stopped going to Mass round about 2005, and I hadn't missed it, exactly, but I hadn't replaced it either. Sitting at that plastic table with the smell of lechon and the Santo Niño on the shelf, and an old man calling me son, it was like being put back into something I hadn't known I'd been taken out of. By the end of May, I was making the trip to Cordova every weekend. By early June, I'd given up the studio in Lapu-Lapu. 8,000 pesos a month for a room I wasn't sleeping in didn't make sense when there was a small concrete house going for 8,000 pesos a month, about 130 euros, 2 streets from Maravich's mother's, with a proper bedroom and a bit of a yard with a mango tree in it. I took it. I signed nothing. There was no contract, just an envelope of cash to a woman called Auntie Beth, who owned 3 houses in the barangay. That's how it works. The water and electricity were on a separate meter, another 3,500 pesos a month, about 56 euros. I paid it. Maravich moved in the second week of June. Ria stayed at her grandmother's during the school week and came over at weekends. We didn't talk about getting married. There was nothing to talk about, technically. She's still legally married to a fella in Saudi who hasn't been in touch since 2017. But it didn't matter. We were a couple in everything but paper. Then, in late June, Tate Boy ran out of insulin. The way he told it, the public clinic had been closed for some renovation thing, and the private pharmacy was charging an arm and a leg, 4,500 pesos a month, about 72 euros, and he hadn't liked to ask anyone. Maravich told me at dinner, not as a request, just as something that had happened. I went to Mercury Drug the next morning, and I bought him 3 months' worth, and I came back with the bag and put it on the table. He didn't say anything. He just nodded, very slowly, twice. I've thought about that nod a lot since. There was nothing wrong with it. He was a proud man. He didn't want to ask. He was grateful. But there was something else in it too, and I didn't see it then because I didn't want to see it. There was an acknowledgement, a kind of contract. Anak now means insulin from now on. That's what the nod was. It wasn't manipulation. It was just, that's how the system works in a Filipino family. The one who can pay, pays. And I'd just signed up. The maths in late June still worked, mind. 8,000 pesos rent, 3,500 pesos utilities, 4,500 pesos insulin, food maybe 6,000 pesos a month, because I was still eating most meals at the Carinderia for free. That's around 22,000 pesos a month, about 350 euros. My pension was 1,100 euros. I was banking 750 euros a month. The buffer was sitting at 13,200 euros in the Bank of Ireland account. I checked it on a Sunday morning in late June with a coffee in the yard under the mango tree, and I thought, I'm doing all right here. I'm actually doing all right. Then there was Junjun, Maravich's brother. 26 years old, lived with his mother technically, worked nowhere, was a bit slow about things. Lovely lad, polite. He'd say po and opo to me every time, which means sir, basically, the respect word. But always around at weekends, always with a small problem. 100 pesos for jeepney fare to a job interview in Mandaue, 200 pesos for a load on his phone because his mother needed to ring him, 500 pesos once for a haircut, and a new shirt for a job that I'm fairly sure didn't exist. Tiny amounts. 500 pesos is about 8 euros. I gave him whatever he asked for every time. I told myself it was just family closeness, the Filipino way. He was Maravic's brother, and Maravic's brother was now my brother-in-law in everything but paper. I should have kept count. I didn't. I should have sat the lad down and asked him what he was doing with his life. I didn't. I just kept handing him the notes and patting him on the shoulder, the way an uncle does. I think about that sometimes, not because the money was much, because of what I was teaching him, and what I was teaching myself. Every time I said yes, without thinking. By the end of July, when the freezer broke at the Carinderia, I'd already trained the whole family, and myself, to expect that Bren would just sort it. And so, when it broke, that's exactly what I did. The freezer went on a Thursday in early August. I was sitting in the Carinderia eating lunch, pancit and a plate of fried fish, when Lola Inde came out from the back with a face on her like she'd seen a ghost. The chest freezer was 30 years old, more or less, and it had been wheezing for a fortnight, and it had finally given up at about 11:30 that morning, with about 8,000 pesos worth of pork and chicken and frozen tilapia in it. Maravich was on her phone trying to get a repair fella out from Mandaue. I sat there with my fork halfway up, and I waited. The repair fella came in the afternoon, looked at it for 10 minutes, said in Cebuano what Maravich translated for me as, basically, "You're better off buying a new one." A new one, proper chest freezer, the size they needed for the Carinderia, was 22,000 pesos from the appliance section in the SM in Cebu City, about 350 euros. They tried to save what they could of the meat by cooking it all that night, gave a load of it to neighbors, but they lost most of it anyway. I put it on my Bank of Ireland card the next morning. Maravich was at the till when I got back with the receipt, and she looked at it, and looked at me, and she said, "Bren, I will pay you back. From the Carinderia. Slowly, but I will pay." And I waved my hand and said, "Don't be daft. It's grand. It's fine. Forget about it." I meant it at the time. 22,000 pesos to the family that was feeding me twice a day for free. The maths actually wasn't insane when you put it that way. I was eating about 400 pesos worth of food a day there. 3 months, and the freezer paid for itself in saved meals. That's what I told myself. I never wrote it down as a loan. She never mentioned it again. That was the first proper one. 22,000 pesos. 350 euros. Buffer down to about 12,800 euros. September was Princess. Princess is Maravich's niece. Daisy's daughter, 10 years old, sweet little thing with a gap in her front teeth, lived in Bohol with her mother and her 2 younger brothers in the family house in a barangay outside Tagbilaran. Daisy rang Maravich on a Sunday in early September. School was back. Princess needed a new uniform. 2,000 pesos. Then it turned out she also needed shoes. 1,500 pesos. Then there was the tuition fee for the term, 8,000 pesos, about 128 euros. Then a week later, there was a laptop, because the school had gone to half its lessons online after the typhoon damage the year before, and you couldn't follow the classes without one. 18,000 pesos, about 290 euros. It came in pieces. That's the bit that got me. If Daisy had rung up and said, "Bren, I need 29,500 pesos in total for the school year," I might have hesitated. Instead, it came as 4 phone calls over 3 weeks. Each one was a small thing, Each one was, well, sure, a child shouldn't go without a uniform. A child shouldn't fail her classes because she hasn't got a laptop. I sent it through Gcash, which is the app everybody uses here. You put the number in, and the money's there in 30 seconds. Maravik did the transfers from her account. I just topped her up. I think about my own niece, Awif's brother's girl, who's about Princess's age and lives in a 4-bedroom house in Douglas, and has every device a child could want. I think about the difference between needing a laptop in Cork and needing a laptop in a barangay outside Tagbilaran. The need's the same. The cost's the same. The difference is who's expected to provide it. In Cork, it's the parents. In Bohol, if there's a Kano in the family, well, you know. By the end of September, I'd put about 29,500 pesos into Princess's school year, plus another 18,000 pesos in monthly costs over the same 6 weeks. Rent, utilities, insulin, food top-ups when the carinderia was tight, 500 pesos here, and 200 pesos there for Junjun. The buffer was down to about 11,400 euros. I still wasn't writing it down. Then October came, and Daisy rang on a Wednesday evening when Maravich and I were eating dinner in the yard. I won't draw it out. The roof on the family house in Bohol was the original from 1998. It was tin, it was rusted through. There'd been a small typhoon 2 weeks before that had ripped a corner of it loose, and the rainy season was coming in proper in November. Daisy was crying on the phone. Maravich was quiet for a long time afterwards. She didn't ask me. She didn't even tell me an amount. She just said, the contractor said it would be 85,000 pesos to do it properly. And then she changed the subject. And we ate the rest of dinner mostly in silence. 85,000 pesos is 1,360 euros. To put that in context for you, that was bigger than my entire monthly pension by about 20%. It was nearly 10% of my buffer in one go. I lay awake that whole night. The mango tree outside the window was scratching against the tin roof of the kitchen, and there was a karaoke going on 3 streets over, and I lay there next to Maravich, who was asleep, or pretending to be, and I did the maths in my head for hours. The buffer at 11,400 euros. Take 1,360 euros off, you're at 10,040 euros. Still all right. The pension still covered the basic monthly. The freezer was a one-off. Princess's school stuff was a one-off. The roof would be a one-off. They were all one-offs. I just kept telling myself that. What I wasn't reckoning with, and I'll be honest with you, what I was actively refusing to reckon with at 4 in the morning under that mango tree, was that the rate of one-offs was now about 1 a month. 22,000 pesos in August, 29,500 pesos in September, 85,000 pesos in October. That's not one-offs. That's a pattern. I told Maravich in the morning, in the kitchen, while she was making the coffee. I said, "Tell Daisy I'll send the 85 for the roof." She went still. She put the kettle down. She came over, and she put her arms around me, and she pressed her face into my chest, and she cried, properly, quietly, for about 20 seconds. And then she stopped, and she went back to making the coffee, and she said, "You are a good man, Bren." Tatai was right. I sent it on the Friday. 85,000 pesos through Gcash. Buffer at 8,680 euros. That's the morning I bought the notebook. I went down to the Sari Sari store at the corner of our lane, the one run by an old woman called Manang Edna, who sold me Marlboros and tinned sardines and sky flakes and the occasional red horse. And I asked her if she had a notebook and a biro. She gave me a small school-style notebook, the kind with a softback cover and a Bic pen. 45 pesos the lot, about 70 cents. I sat in the yard that afternoon, and I wrote the numbers down for the first time. February to October. Every peso I could remember. Going through the Bank of Ireland statements on the phone. It took me about 3 hours, and the figures came to about 195,000 pesos in 9 months. Roughly 3,120 euros. Plus the housing I was paying separately. Plus the food I'd been getting free. Seeing it on paper was different. I want to be clear about that. I'd been carrying the numbers around in my head. Sort of. The way you carry the price of bread or the price of milk, vague. And it had felt manageable. Written down in biro on a school notebook in the yard under the mango tree, it looked like what it was, which was a hemorrhage. By the start of November, the monthly outgoings, once you added the rent and the utilities and the insulin and the food top-ups and the average of the last 3 months' family things, were running at about 45,000 pesos a month, 720 euros, pension 1,100 euros. I was now drawing down the buffer at about 380 euros a month, even on the regular spending. And that was before the next freezer or roof or laptop landed. That's around when Junjun's girlfriend turned out to be pregnant. Junjun himself didn't tell me. Maravich did, on a Sunday evening at her mother's, after Mass, with Lola Inde and Tatay Boy in the room. The girl was 18. From a barangay over in Mactan. 4 months gone. The hospital? They'd need 15,000 pesos for the prenatal care and the pre-delivery. More for the delivery itself when it came. Maravich asked me, gently, what we could do. The whole family was looking at me. It was the first time I'd been asked something with everybody in the room. And I just heard myself say it. I said, I'm sorry. I can't this one. I didn't shout. I didn't get angry. I just said it, looking at the floor, holding a glass of San Miguel that had gone warm, and the room went quiet for about 2 seconds, and then Maravich said, very softly, in English, "Okay, Bren, that was it. Okay, Bren." 2 words. No fight. No row. No tears. She didn't speak much to me for 3 days after that. She wasn't cold, exactly. She made the coffee in the morning, and she said good morning, and she went to the carinderia. But there was a thing in the air between us that hadn't been there before, like a door had closed somewhere in the house and I couldn't tell which room it was. She wasn't angry with me. That's the thing I want you to understand. She was... disappointed isn't the word either. She was just adjusting. She was taking in a new piece of information about who I was. And I could feel her doing it. That was the first time I went to bed and lay awake and thought, properly thought, I am drowning here, slowly, and I am watching it happen. I picked up the notebook from the bedside table that night, and I wrote 1 line at the bottom of the last page. Buffer 5,400 euros. Burn 380 euros per month minimum. About 14 months to 0 on the regular. Less if anything else breaks. I closed the notebook. I put it back on the table. I lay there in the dark next to Maravich, who was asleep with her back to me, and I listened to the rain starting up on the new tin roof down in Bohol that I'd never even seen. And I thought, for the first time properly, that this couldn't last. Raylan was the cousin from her mother's side. 22, lived in Talisay south of Cebu City, worked as a sales lady in a Watson's in one of the malls down there. I'd met her once at a christening in October. Quiet girl, pretty, the kind who said po and opo and laughed behind her hand. She doubled over on the shop floor on the 28th of November, a Friday, and they got her to Vicente Soto Memorial Medical Center within the hour. Perforated appendix. They had her in surgery by the evening. I heard about it on the Saturday morning. Maravich took the call from her own mother. The call had come from Raylan's mother to Lola Inde first, the way news moves through a Filipino family, working its way along the family WhatsApp before it gets to anybody who might actually do something about it. The surgery had gone fine. Raylan was awake and asking for her phone. The bill, by Saturday lunchtime, was running at about 30,000 pesos, 480 euros, and would land on the family on Monday when she was discharged. Maravich told me sitting at the kitchen table at about 10:30 in the morning. The fan was going. The radio in the next house was playing one of those Tagalog love songs at a volume the singer hadn't asked for. She put 2 coffees down between us, and she said, just like that, no preamble, "Bren, the cousin in Talisay is in hospital. The bill is 30,000. Auntie Lourdes is asking the family." I didn't answer for about 10 seconds. I picked up the coffee. I put it down again. I'd had the notebook in my back pocket since the night of the Junjun conversation. I'd been carrying it around like a man carries a diagnosis. I said, "Maravich, I can't." She looked at me. Not surprised, not angry, just looked. I said, "I'm sorry. The numbers don't work. I've been doing them. I'll show you." I went and got the notebook off the bedside table. I sat back down at the kitchen table, and I opened it, and I turned it round so she could read it. She read it for a long time. I'm not sure how much of it she could parse. The columns weren't pretty, my handwriting was rubbish, and she'd been to high school but only in Cebuano medium. But she could read the numbers, and the numbers were the only thing that mattered. She read down the page. She read the line at the bottom. Buffer 5,400 euros. Burn 380 euros a month minimum. 14 months to zero. Her finger touched the 5,400 euros once, and then moved away. She closed the notebook. She slid it back across the table to me. She said, slowly, in careful English, "Brendan, in my family, the one who has, gives. That is how we live. If you cannot, I understand. But this is who I am." There was no anger in it. That's the thing I keep going back to. There was no manipulation in it either. She wasn't trying to guilt me. She was just telling me, stating it. Like she was telling me where she was born, or what her middle name was. This is who I am. This is my family. This is how it works. I sat there with the coffee going cold, and I felt something move in my chest that I haven't been able to name since. It wasn't anger. It wasn't grief, exactly. It was something more like recognition. The recognition of a thing that had been there in plain sight for 9 months, and that I'd been determined not to look at. She wasn't lying. She'd never lied. Tatay Boy hadn't lied either, with the slow nod over the insulin. Daisy hadn't lied with the roof. Junjun hadn't lied with the jeepney fare. They'd all told me, in their various ways, exactly who they were, and exactly what loving them was going to cost. The freezer hadn't been a scam. Princess's laptop hadn't been a scam. The roof hadn't been a scam. They were just the price of being a Kano in a Filipino family. And I'd been the one telling myself the lie, the whole time. That this was different, that it would steady out, that the next month would be the quiet one, that the next request would be the last. I'd done the same trick I'd done with Awif for 32 years. I'd watched the engine and not listened to the hull. She'd told me, that morning at the kitchen table, what the rate was going to be for the rest of our lives. The one who has, gives. There would always be another Raylan, always another roof, always another insulin. Not because she wanted there to be, because that's how a family of 15 people works in a country where the public hospital wants 30,000 pesos cash up front before they'll discharge a girl with a perforated appendix. I said, "I love you. I want you to know that." She said, "I know." I said, I've nothing else, Maravik. If this goes, I've nothing else." She nodded. She took my hand across the table. She held it for a while. Then she got up and went and put the kettle on again. She rang her mother that afternoon and told her something. I couldn't follow the Cebuano, but I could follow Lola Inde's tone on the other end of the line, which wasn't angry, just resigned. Maravich and Lola Inde, between them and Auntie Lourdes and a sister-in-law in Bohol, scraped together about 18,000 pesos from the rest of the family in the end. The hospital let Ralin out on a payment plan for the rest. Nobody died. Nobody held it against me, openly. But I felt it, every Sunday for the next 3 weeks. The very small distance, half an inch, no more, between me and the people in that front room with the Santo Niño on the shelf. I didn't sleep that Saturday night. I sat up in the kitchen with the notebook and a warm San Miguel and the small fluorescent tube buzzing over the sink. I did the maths properly, for the first time, with the numbers I'd been hiding from. Buffer 4,500 euros after a few small things that had landed in the meantime. Burn 380 euros a month, even with no surprises. Average of one big surprise per month at 400 euros to 1,400 euros a pop. If I straight-lined the last 3 months, I had, being honest about it, not lying to myself this time, somewhere between 4 and 7 months before the buffer was gone. Not 14. 4. 4 months from zero. At 55. With no house in Cork, no Awefe to go back to, no Meriad who could afford to take me in, a half pension that wouldn't rent a bedsit in Ballincollig. I sat there at about 3 in the morning, and I thought about Tate Boy's hands on my shoulders in May, and the way he'd called me Anak, and the Lechon, and Maravich's hand in mine for 4 seconds outside the studio in Lapu-Lapu. I thought about all of it. None of it had been a lie. I'd been a son to him. I'd been loved by her. That part was real. One, I'm sure of it. I'd swear to it on my mother's grave. And it didn't matter. That was the bit nobody on YouTube tells you. It can be real and still be unaffordable. Both things, at the same time, in the same kitchen. I made my decision somewhere around 2:30 in the morning, with the tube light buzzing and the rain starting up on the tin roof. I wasn't leaving her, exactly. You can't leave somebody you still love. I was just getting out from under the maths before the maths got me. I would tell her in the new year, after Christmas. Let her have one more Christmas with me there, since we'd all been talking about it. The trip to Bohol, the Noche Buena, the godchild's baptism on the 27th. I'd give them all that. And then, in the first week of January, I'd tell her, gently, with the notebook on the table, exactly what I'd told myself in the dark. Not from her. From the maths. I closed the notebook. I went back to bed. I didn't tell her for 6 weeks. The Christmas was lovely. That's the part that still aches. We went to Bohol for 4 days, stayed in the new roofed house with Daisy and Princess, and the little fellas, and it rained every afternoon, and we didn't care. And Tate Boy gave a speech at Noche Buena that I didn't understand a word of, and I cried at anyway. I'd already decided. I just hadn't said. The last few days before I told her, sitting in the yard under the mango tree at sunset with a red horse, watching the swifts come in over the tin roofs of the barangay and the kids playing basketball under the streetlight on the corner court, I kept thinking, I'll never have this again. Whatever else happens to me, I'll never have this again. And I haven't. Not so far. I told her on the 8th of January, a Thursday. She'd been to the Carinderia in the morning, come back about 3 for a rest before the dinner shift, and we sat down at the kitchen table with the notebook between us and a coffee each. And I just said it. I said, "Marovitch, I have to leave. I can't stay. The numbers don't work. And if I stay, I'll be a man with nothing in 6 months. And I'm too old to be that man." She didn't speak for a long time. She held the coffee in both hands. The fan was going. There was a cock crowing somewhere down the lane, even though it was the middle of the afternoon. The radio in Auntie Beth's house next door was playing the same Tagalog love songs it always played. She said, "In the end, where will you go?" I said, "I don't know. Somewhere quieter, somewhere cheaper." I'd thought maybe Dumaguete. Marayad's old neighbor from Glanmire moved there years ago. Said it's slower than Cebu, cheaper than here. She nodded. She wiped her face once with the back of her hand, and she didn't make any noise. Then she said, "And this is the bit that broke me. I knew, Bren, from the night of the Rullin one. I knew you would have to. I just didn't know when." She wasn't angry. She wasn't even really hurt by then. She'd had 6 weeks to sit with it the same as I had, and she'd done her own maths, and she'd come to the same answer at her own kitchen table. We sat there for about an hour. She told me she'd never wanted me to feel like a wallet. I told her I never had. She told me her family loved me, her father especially. I told her I knew. We talked about Ria, about how I'd send something for her schooling when I could. We talked about the Carinderia, about whether the freezer was holding up. We did not talk about whether either of us would ever come back to this. There was no point. The next morning, Tate Boy came over. Marovitch must have rung him the night before. He sat on the plastic chair in the front room of our little house, with his thin hands on his knees, and he looked at me for a long time. And he said something in Cebuano, which Marovitch, who was crying quietly behind me by that point, translated in pieces. He said, "You came to my daughter when she was alone. You ate at my wife's table. You bought my insulin. You will always be welcome in my house. But I understand you cannot stay. A man must know what he can carry." That's exactly what he said. In Cebuano, he must have said it some other way, and Marovitch put it into English for me. But those were the words she chose, and they were the right ones. I shook his hand, and then I hugged him. I'm not a hugger, but I hugged him, and he held on for about 10 seconds, and he said, in English this time, very slowly, "Anak," just the once, and then he left. I flew to Dumaguete on the 14th of January. Cebu Pacific, 90 minutes, 2,400 pesos. 2 duffel bags, same Nokia. The coat I'd worn out of the Long Valley I'd given away to a fella in the barangay months before. It was useless here, and he'd needed something for a wedding. I left Marovitch at the house in Cordova. She didn't come to the airport. We'd agreed she wouldn't. She made me breakfast that morning, fried egg and rice and a slice of Spam, which is what they eat for breakfast here, and a coffee. And we ate in silence, and she went to the Carinderia, and I waited for the grab. Dumaguete's quieter, like everybody says it is. Long boulevard along the water, lined with acacias, the kind of trees that drop blossom on you when you walk under them. Tricycles, but slower than in Cebu. A lot of expats, Americans mostly. Some Aussies, a few Germans, a handful of Brits. Silliman University is the biggest thing in town, and you see students everywhere, walking in groups with their books. There's a Robinson's Mall and a Lee Plaza and a market down by the port. I rented a small flat off a fella from Vancouver who'd been here 12 years. 12,000 pesos a month, about 190 euros. Bigger than the Cordova house, with proper aircon and hot water. second floor of a small building 3 streets back from the boulevard. I took it for 6 months. I bought a kettle and a frying pan and a bag of rice and a small Sanyo electric fan from a shop on Purtice's Street, and I cooked for myself for the first time since I was 23. The maths now. 12,000 rent, 2,000 utilities, 6,000 food. I'm eating in caranderias, fish at the market, the occasional Jollibee Chicken Joy, you'll be glad to hear, 3,000 for transport, and the odd red horse, 5,000 for everything else, phone, soap, the rare visit to the doctor for the back. About 28,000 pesos a month, 450 euros. Pension 1,100 euros. Banking 650 euros again. The buffer's steadied at 4,200 euros, and it's actually creeping up a bit, slowly. It'll never be much. It's enough. I send Marivic 5,000 pesos a month, about 80 euros. Mostly for Ria. She's in 3rd year of high school now, doing well. Wants to be a nurse like Tatay's sister. We text. Not every day. Once a week, maybe. She tells me about the carinderia, about Lola Inde's bad hip, about Junjun, who has the baby now and is working as a security guard in an SM in Mandaue, of all things. The lad's straightening out. I'm glad about that. I haven't been back to Cordova. I don't think I will. Not because anything's bad between us. It isn't. We're as good as you can be, given. But I know what going back would do. To her, to me, to the buffer. There's a man down the boulevard, a Yorkshireman about 60, who told me on my 2nd week here, in this country, the cleanest break is the one you finish. He's right. I'm telling you this story because there's a load of fellas back home, Cork, Manchester, Glasgow, wherever, sitting in front of YouTube the way I was sitting in front of YouTube in that Travelodge in Limerick. And the videos are still there. The lads with the San Miguels and the balcony views telling you you can do it on $1,200 a month. Here's the thing I want you to know. They're not lying, exactly. You can do it on $1,200 a month. I'm doing it now, more or less, on around the same. But here's what they don't tell you. They don't tell you that $1,200 a month is a budget for one. For one man, alone, in a small flat, eating fish from the market and not falling in love with anybody. The minute you fall in love with a Filipina, properly, the real thing, not a bar girl, not a catfish, not somebody working you, you stop having one mouth to feed. You have 15. Father, mother, sister, niece, nephew, cousin, brother, brother-in-law. There's always somebody, every month, who genuinely needs help. Not because they're lying, because the country is poor, and the family is the only welfare system there is. And you, the Kano, are now part of the family. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. That's the thing I want to be clear about. It's a beautiful system. It's why nobody goes hungry in those barangays, even when the typhoons come. The system works. It's just that the system doesn't run on 1,100 euros a month. It runs on whatever the man with the most has, and if you're the man with the most, the answer is whatever you have. So if you're going to do this, do the maths twice, then do them again with a family attached, then do them a 3rd time with one big medical emergency a year, and one major repair every 2 years, and a kid through university every 5. If your number's still all right after all of that, go. If it isn't, don't go pretending it is. Know what you can afford to give. Know what you can afford to lose. And know. This is the bit. This is the thing I want you to take from me. Know the difference between being loved and being needed. In this country, sometimes they're the same word, and sometimes they're not. And the trouble is, you don't always know which one you're hearing until you've already said yes. Marivic loved me. I'll go to my grave saying it. She also needed me. Both things were true at the same time. And I wasn't rich enough to be both. That's it. That's the story. Thanks for listening to an old engineer ramble. I hope it spares somebody some grief. Welcome back. That was Brendan, in his own words. 55 years old, from a council estate on the north side of Cork, sitting now in a small flat in Dumaguete, and sending €80 a month to a woman in Cordova for her daughter's school books. No scammer in the story, no catfish, no villain, just a Cork pension and a Cebuano family system, and a man honest enough to admit he wasn't rich enough for the love he'd found. If you came to this video looking for a horror story, I'm sorry to disappoint. The Philippines does horror stories. We tell plenty of them on this channel, but it does this kind too, and these are in some ways the more useful ones, because they don't let you off the hook. You can't watch Brendan and think, well, I'd never fall for a bar girl, so I'd be fine. You wouldn't fall for a bar girl. You'd fall for a quiet woman in a green plastic chair who asked why you were eating alone, and you'd be just as broke at the end of it as the lads who got worked over on Mango Avenue. Maybe more, because the love would have been real. The retirement videos sell paradise. Paradise is real. The boulevards in Dumaguete, the carinderias in Cordova, the lechon at Noche Buena, the old man who calls you anak in his front room. All of that is real. It's just that paradise turns out to be full of people, and people cost money. Far more than the videos quote you. Sometimes the most dangerous lie isn't told by another person. Sometimes it's the one we tell ourselves about what our money can buy. If you're a Western man watching this and thinking about the move, do the maths. Do them with a family attached. Do them with one Raylan a year, one princess every September, one roof every 5 years. If your number still works, fair play. Go in clear-eyed and good luck to you. If it doesn't, listen to Brendan. He paid the tuition for that lesson so you don't have to. Thanks for watching. If this story stayed with you, give it a thumbs up. It genuinely helps the channel reach the people who need to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't, and let us know in the comments what you'd have done in Brendan's place. We read them all. I'm signing off for Inside the Philippines. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We'll see you on the next one.